All right, folks, doing this video the second time, not unusual, as Mercury is slow, and in this case, happily slowly going direct. Full moon in Aries tomorrow morning, October 20th, 7:57 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, I rarely do videos this late, so it isn't sort of the natural lighting that you guys are used to. Number two, thank you so much for sticking with me, those of you who have. I've been meaning to do videos between the last one, and this is the first one I've been able to do. Thematically, there has been a fair amount to talk about, but I'm going to condense it all in this video and see how far I can get, and if there's anything I want to expand on, I'll do so in future videos. But thank you for sticking with the channel while it has been doldrummy since the last Libra new moon video. That Libra new moon, as if you recall, and there'll be a link to that video at the end of this one, we're still under the influence of that new moon for another 2 weeks, till November the 4th, when we have the Scorpio new moon. That Libra new moon was opposite Chiron, and Chiron is still relevant at this time, partly because it is in Aries, and this full moon is also in Aries. And while I would not consider Chiron conjunct this full moon, it's still thematically an important body at present. Now, a full moon in Aries is a notoriously temperamental planet. I know the moon is not a planet. Don't get technical on me. We're talking in astrological terms, a body, if you will. The moon is concerned above all with our emotional contentment and our emotional fulfillment. Now, we can associate it with intuition. We can associate it, I think, correctly with our energy. We can frankly associate it with ourselves as it moves around your chart. Indeed, the two things that I look at for myself to get a sense of how my days are going to go and what they're going to concern on a day-to-day basis are where the moon is on my birth chart at any given time. You know, the moon takes roughly about 2.5 days to go through every house, and where the moon is on the lunar return chart for you at any given time. But I'm not going to get into the lunar return chart in this video. Okay, we will, if I feel like that's got to be a separate video, and we'll do it in a separate video. The moon in Aries, the moon longs for peace, tranquility, fulfillment, and contentment. The moon does not long for agitation. And Aries is, of course, as the first sign of the zodiac, the prime mover. And the moon in Aries is very tuned into what needs to be changed and what is not working, and demands quick solutions or at least action towards fixing what is not working. So there's a degree of agitation. There is what I call a low pain threshold associated with this moon. Now, whether this low pain threshold manifests as sniping and complaining and argument and action and irritation, or whether on a larger scale it concerns itself with an awareness, depending on where the sign of Aries is in your chart and what house it occupies and what that stands for, an awareness of what fundamentally, even in a bigger picture, is not working, where you are not in alignment, and how to move towards that alignment and to create that alignment. That energy is packed into this driven, goal-oriented full moon. Now, full moons can bring completions and contracts. They can bring visibility. They can bring emotional, and that can be very much part of this emotional. The way I like to put it is sort of the milk coming to a boil in a pot and flowing over, a revealing of our emotional and intuitive truths, how we are feeling about something really. What do we know? Where is something going? How are we feeling about it? Do we have a meltdown about it? You know, those kinds of things. And those meltdowns can be, even if the energy pulls back after the full moon, pay attention to what is going on either for yourself or somebody else who's having a meltdown, because full moons are more truthful than we give them credit for when they are revealing pent up, bottled up truths, okay, often in an emotional way. There can be, you know, tears and romance and, you know, full mooniness, fears and all sorts of, you know the male if you follow the moon, and you get a sense of, are you sleeping enough? Are you not? Is your sleep disturbed? Is it not? You know, notoriously a time of not enough sleep and energy. Okay, so all of that is true. Full moon in Aries, some element of what is working, what is not working, some element of external alignment and internal alignment. Internal alignment meaning knowing yourself what is not working and how to go about trying to fix it. And it's almost like, I'm not a big proponent of things like the law of attraction, but there is this kind of internal configuration, what some people might call changing your vibration, that then starts to attract externally what you are looking for, because you're changing your point of focus, or you're changing your outlook, or you're changing your vibration, because you're so attuned to what is not working and where would you like things to be. There's an envisioning that can happen. There's certainly an action plan and adventure, solving problems, achieving things, going after things, making things happen. Why am I here? What do I want to create? What do I want to fix? Let's go. I've had enough. That kind of feeling associated with this full moon. Now, let's talk about other things associated with this full moon. When I was thinking about titles for this full moon, of course, I was thinking about words like intensity and violence, and I don't know what I'm going to use or not use, as I said, but part of it is that the full moon is opposite Mars and it squares Pluto. Now, here's the funny thing about this full moon. It's very possible or likely that as you headed towards this full moon, yesterday, day before, the day before that, it's Tuesday today, so, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, especially Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there could have been a wave of, let's just use the word conflict. And then you come to this full moon, and this full moon is surprisingly forward-looking, solution-oriented. But then I'm warning you that after the full moon, and typically I will always say for full moon, the 24 to 48, 72 hours, 48 hours, 24 hours towards the full moon are the most full moony days. But sometimes with full moons, the 24, 48, 72 hours after a full moon can also have this kind of aftermath of what has happened just prior to the full moon. In this case, I'm going to somehow say that it may be that Friday, Saturday, Sunday had some sort of a peak, that as you came to Monday afternoon and Tuesday, now I'm using Pacific time so you can adjust to it, all of a sudden it gives you just this, like, how the clouds just clear temporarily, but the clouds are going to gather again in about 24 to 48 hours as Mars starts to square Pluto. So as we headed to the full moon, the sun squared Pluto. And then Mars will square Pluto a couple of days after this full moon. So whatever it was, that it's like the appetizer was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, as we headed towards this full moon, and the main course and the fight, the clash, the argument, the line drawing, the fight, the Mars and Pluto are the two most aggressive, they are the two most violent planets that we have. And when two planets square each other, it's like a gridlock. And Mars in Libra, where Mars is in your chart, where Libra sits in your chart, what house it occupies, what that house stands for, something needs to be done, something needs to be channeled, something needs to be actioned there to break this chokehold coming from Pluto in Capricorn, so to speak. So if you were to say, well, what planet should I focus on? It's a full moon in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars rules this chart. Mars is square Pluto. You are gearing towards very testosterone, very male energy, pursuit of goals, but also defending boundaries. And Mars square Pluto, Pluto is a planet of transformation that you cannot control, that the gods and fate know of, and fated transformation. Okay? Often, it's given a bad rap, but listen, often for our good, okay? But sometimes with fated transformation, also not. However, Pluto in this case may also signify a kind of control, an enemy, a desire, an effort from someone to control, domination, intense financial or personal involvement, some of which could be welcome, but often some of which is not welcome. Stalkery behavior, control, watching you, trying to keep tabs on you, trying to manage you, trying to, if they can, influence your money in some way. And Mars in Libra, even though it is compromised in Libra, and may well have to use slightly more diplomatic techniques, certainly partnerships and contracts and agreements and legalities could be featured. And there's something with regard to aggressively pursuing or defending, depending on where Libra sits in your chart and what house it occupies. It may be that it's the Mars in Libra that has to take the lead and has to take charge shortly after the full moon to address whatever drama has been brewing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday as you've headed towards this full moon. So the drama is not over yet. This full moon couple of days may make you feel like, oh, everything, the lines have not been drawn yet. You may find that you are going to have to enter that battlefield. Remember the title of the New Moon in Libra video, War or Peace, War and Peace. You may have to enter the battlefield a day or two from now, maybe even on the 20th as the full moon as Mars starts to head towards Pluto. This full moon highlights that Mars-Pluto square, the planet of action and war and desire and passion and going after one's goals and rapaciousness and temper and bull in the china shop and violence and aggression and assertion and hunting, gathering, and boundary setting, but also pursuit, squares Pluto, planet of unrelenting and fated transformation that you have absolutely no control over, but also of controlling and enmeshment behaviors, whether it is personal or romantic or usurping in some way or just kind of boundary defying. So the planet of defending one's boundaries squares off against a very powerful planet that constantly tries to test one's boundaries, either in fated ways or else by putting us in opposition to people who kind of tend to play that kind of scorpionic role. Okay, I've done videos on Pluto in the last 2 or 3 months. You'll find 2 or 3 of them. You're welcome to check them out in my video list. It can be an immensely transforming planet, of course, but it can also be a really disturbing one. Okay, so Mars square Pluto, Mars in Libra, Mars ruling this full moon, Mars disposited by Venus. Venus is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in Aquarius. Aquarius ruled by Saturn. Saturn is in Aquarius. So Saturn is one of the dispositors of the chart. And also Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, ruled by Venus. So the Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. And 2 things are highlighted by this. One, the Saturn-Uranus square. So again, we're dealing with, as I have mentioned to you before, setting boundaries around the old so you can put it behind you. However you choose to do that, whether you choose to make peace or whether you choose to make war. And preparing for the portal of the future so that you can move towards these future energies. Because remember, in November, we're going to have the first of the Taurus-Scorpio eclipses. So the energy is changing. It is moving. There's a new portal that's opening up, but there's also a demand in the second half of this year. And the key to that is Saturn in Uranus. Where does Uranus sit in your chart? No behaviors or patterns that are not in your best interests anymore, but you have been displaying for 28 years or so with Saturn. Saturn is in Uranus. Where's Uranus? What house does it occupy? What does that house stand for? And there are lessons there around a new set of boundaries and patterns and building a spine and acting in disciplined ways that will ensure your highest potential. And with Saturn, those behaviors are always difficult because Saturn is the great teacher and they're behaviors that we are weak in, and Saturn is training us to deal with them. Now, Saturn-Uranus square, but also keep in mind that Jupiter and Saturn and Mercury have just gone direct. So between now and the end of the year, it is going to be increasingly forward movement, okay? Now, if you have Saturn retrograde in your birth chart, it is the Saturn retrograde period that we're coming out of. since about May, I think, where you will have felt the Saturnian influences most strongly. Okay, so if you have Saturn retrograde in your birth chart, it's likely that the Saturn retrograde periods every year are more challenging, more lesson filled, more restrictive, more feeling like Saturn is beating up on you than when Saturn is direct. So now that Saturn is direct, you can breathe a little bit and implement the solutions that you have learned and you feel you need to implement. If you have Saturn direct in your birth chart, then the lessons are coming up, gear up, and see what Saturn has to offer. If you have Jupiter retrograde in your birth chart, then the luckier or more fortuitous period for you may well be when Jupiter is retrograde every year. Do not despair that when Jupiter is direct, that luck is not on your side. Jupiter's always working and turning. The retrograde periods for Jupiter and Saturn, for every planet, they have their own meaning. But Jupiter is direct, so if you have Jupiter direct in your birth chart, then you might start to see forward movement in the Aquarius part of your chart, and the end of a 12-year cycle and the start of a 12-year cycle really now, between now and December, is trying to find its place. Saturn-Uranus square requires us to deal with and implement Saturn's lessons to find freedom, where Uranus in Taurus is trying to liberate us and moving us into our authenticity. Where does Taurus sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? There's something there. There's a greater authenticity and liberation that is trying to happen there, that is dependent on the Aquarius part of your chart and learning lessons and acting in self-loving ways that are disciplined and respectful of yourself and your potential. Okay? The planets are also Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury now direct, so we get to move forward. Mercury direct just a couple of days ago. So we are having all this stuff is happening around this full moon, which is why the energies as we head to it and move forward from it are so tumultuous. Chiron and Pluto and Jupiter have played an important role with this Mercury retrograde, because when Mercury was direct, it opposed Chiron, trine Jupiter, squared Pluto. And as it went retrograde, it squared Pluto, trine Jupiter, and it has almost opposed Chiron, but just as it was going to, it has gone direct. Chiron, the wound. It was so interesting when that without my consciously, there are two books I started to read that have such a Chiron influence on them. One of them is this, it's going to be reversed. I'm sorry. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. I don't know how to reverse this. It just looks totally twisted, right? Like it looks completely the wrong way around. How inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle. What do you want me to say? I mean, how much more Chiron can that title be? It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle, Mark Wolin. I do not know this man. I'm not getting a cut from this book. I'm just telling you how chilled I was when I was reading it, going, oh my God, this is so... And the other is a fiction book, On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, a novel by Ocean Vuong. Again, now I might be mispronouncing his last name, so please forgive me, but again, a very Chiron dealing with not just hurts, but the kind of wounds and traumas that get embedded in us practically in our childhoods and practically as part of our fate and our destiny that we have to solve. And of course, Chiron is right now in Aries. So we have the new moon in Libra opposing Chiron. 2 more weeks of dealing with this kind of Chiron energy. And the full moon occurs in the sign where Chiron is. So if you know where Aries sits in your chart, you know what house it occupies and what that stands for, there's a certain amount of healing that is taking place. And by healing, I mean healing in capital letters, bold capital neon letters. And, the idea of It Didn't Start With You, and this idea of carrying parents' and grandparents' trauma into your cellular history is now a lot more known. It's just a fascinating read, as is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Who knew that I would be starting a book club? I'm not. And as I said, I don't get a cut from... I was just kind of amazed at the synchronicity of reading these books and they being so full of Chiron-like issues. So, what a complex time. We had 3 planets now that have gone direct after retrograde cycles. The Mercury retrograde was a doozy of a Mercury retrograde. Sometimes I just feel them when they start and end, but there've been the bizarreness of it has been, and it's not just the bizarreness of it. There really has been a feeling of things being revised, and somehow with this full moon, my friends, this whole Sun squaring Pluto, Mars squaring Pluto business, the full moon itself, the 24 hours before and after, may give you a chance to breathe. But I can't imagine that before, as I said, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and maybe now Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday after the full moon, are not going to have a certain intensity, call, and need. At the same time, remember, those will likely be about past issues. At the same time, with this full moon in Aries, still very focused on what do I want to create? How am I doing against where I want to be? What is not working? Done with it. We are making changes, and some of these changes will come to you from outside based on the internal wishing and configuring that you have been doing. Okay? Shall I leave it at this for now? We've talked about the planets going direct. We've talked about rulership. We've talked about dispositing. We've talked about the full moon in Aries. We've talked about Chiron. Mercury direct is going to trine Jupiter again and square Pluto again. So the Sun squares Pluto, Mars squared Pluto, and then Mercury is going to square Pluto. It's not done with the squaring Pluto energy for a couple of weeks. And then we have the new moon in Scorpio, another Mars ruled sign. I told you that until we get to the full moon in Gemini in the middle of December, we have intense lunations, intense energy that is really revving up to say, finish with the old, whether you make war or peace, and on with the new. Okay, so that is still very much the theme. I hope you found this video useful. Feel free to share it, like it, comment on it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button. If it is an intense time, take advantage of it. And if you need to draw boundaries, you need to pursue goals, do both. And pay attention to what intuitively feels truthful and prophetic to you, even in terms of what you feel needs to change. You may pull back on those changes temporarily, but I will not be surprised if in a few weeks or a few months' time, you don't realize that those prophetic truths that have bubbled over in terms of they could be frustrations, they could be irritations, they could be emotions, they could be